Good morning and welcome to Saturday special of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Caste system is so endemic that it's almost strangulating the social order. But there have been certain misgivings about its origin, about its essential attributes, as well as about its relevance today. I describe race, casteism essentially as an artificial hierarchy that helps determine standing and respect, assumption of beauty and competence, and even who gets the benefit of double and access to resources. So it's a comprehensive thing. It's artificial undoubtedly, but it determines the social order, it determines the competence of the people. And then we have got to understand that caste is quite different from racism. It focuses on infrastructure of social divisions and rankings, whereas race is metric that is used to determine one's place in that. So race follows caste. The concept of caste has been around for thousands of years, and race is only 400 to 500 years old. Basically, caste is a term that's more precise, it's more comprehensive, and it gets at the underlying infrastructure that more often than not we cannot see. But there is undergirding much of the inequality and injustice and disparities that we live in. Coming to the caste system in India, we have got to be clear that it's a paradigmic ethnographic example of caste. India is a classic example. It has origins in ancient India, though the people say it was not there, but it was. However, this ancient custom of casteism was transformed by the various ruling elites in the medieval era, in the early modern era, and the modern era, especially under the Mughal Empire and the British Raj. These two periods of Indian history were primarily responsible for making caste system horrible as it is today. And of course, now there's an affirmative action. And if you look at the earliest reference to Varnas from the Vedic period, you would see that they were not associated with family lineage. And there's evidence that they played a major role in organizing the Indian societies. The collapse of the Mughal era saw the rise of powerful men who associated themselves with kings, priests, ascetics, affirming the regal and martial form of the caste to be ideal, and reshaped apparently casteless social groups into differentiated caste communities. Had Mughal period not been there, had the British not come in to fragment the society so that they could rule over there, the caste would not have that sort of pernicious impact that it had. As a matter of fact, if you see, the caste system is not in India alone. You look at the whole region in Indian subcontinent, Nepal, China, Thailand, Sumatra, Bali all have a caste system. And it's not only Hindus who have the caste system. It's a misnomer to call that Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Sikhism in India do not have caste. They are the same endemic social disorder permeating their very concept. Now, Varna, as I discussed last time, literally means type, color, or class, and was a framework for regrouping people into class. It was first used in Vedic Indian society. It has been frequently used in ancient Indian texts. The four classes were Brahmins, the priestly class, Kshatriyas, the administrators and the warriors, Vaishya, the party, merchants, artisans, tradesmen, and farmers, and Shudras, the labor class. But then there's another class, the fifth element. They were worse than Shudras. They were the tribals and the untouchables. The jati is something different. People often confuse jati. Jati means basically from birth, and it is used much less frequently in the ancient text than varna is. Caste is nowhere used. Either varna is used or jati is used. And jati is basically a family name which has been percolating, and it's basically the ritual ranking of the family. Jati is an occupational segregation of the caste system. There is endogamy in that, and both in the past and in many thoughts which are not Indian in the modern times have been born into a given caste, and then that forms their jati. Now, the term caste is not an original Indian word. Now, let's be very clear. It's now widely used both in English and in Indian languages. And caste is derived from a Portuguese word casta. Casta means race, lineage, breed. And originally, pure and unmixed breed was considered to be the prime qua non of the society. Now, I like to point out that people, when they say the caste system in India, forget that it was a social order and it was not only in India. Look at the Greeks and the Romans. They are the patricians and the plebeians. That was a class. The plebeians could not go and mix with the patricians. That was a very clear thing. So there is no exact translation of the Indian language. The approximate term of the caste are either varna or jati. And as such, the Indian caste system does not have a real definition of class. But there are the six characteristics of caste system now. First is segmentation of society into groups where membership is determined by the birth. Second is a hierarchical system. Generally, the Brahmins at the top, and then Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. Third characteristic is restriction on feeding and social intercourse, and minute rules for the kind of food and drink that the upper classes should have from the hands of the people belonging to the lower class. Then it was segregation, where the individual castes lived together. And the system was the dominant caste would live in the center, in the village. And then the other castes would be in the concentric circles around that. And the periphery was with the Shudras. So much so, there were restrictions on the use of the water wells for each caste. And this was carried to the extreme limit by the British when they had the water from the same well or from the same tap but two different pictures were there. One was the Muslim water, the other was the Hindu water. Then the Hindu water was again different, subdivided into Brahmin water and non-Brahmin water. Then occupational generalities inherited, lack of unrestricted choice of professions. The caste members were restricted their own members. It was like a trade union then. So why criticize it? There are jobs which are unionized jobs. If you're not a part of the union, you cannot get a job here. So it was rudimentary, a trade union. Then endogamy was important, restriction on marrying the person outside the caste. But in some cases, hypergamy was allowed. But there was no rigidity in intermarriages. You know, Bhim married a girl, Raksha. He was Kshatri and he married a Raksha. And his son was famous Kadocha. So people, even the princes have been marrying that. And in social intercourse, Rama in Ramayana ate the berries which had been eaten partly by Shabri, who were a scheduled caste. So there were at least two perspectives to the origin of caste. The first was ideological factors that drive the caste system into and hold it rooted in four varnas. The second school of thought focuses on the socio-economic factors and claims those factors drive the caste. As a matter of fact, the caste system was not something rigid. It was ever evolving societal reality that could only be understood by the study of historical evidence. Now let's come to the historical origin. The first is, as I said, Vedic Varnas, that was 1500 years before Christ. The first three groups, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, have parallels with the Indo-European societies. But Shudras is a typical Brahminical invention in North India. It was not in South India. It was not in West India. Later on it percolated. but, but primarily it was a North Indian problem. And the Varna society is revered in Hindu religious texts. You know, in Rig Veda, the Purush Sukta is a part of the Rig Veda. It mentions very clearly that Varna system is a base of society. Manu Simriti comment is also often cited, and the many revered texts and doctrines mention it. The Varna Vesta Rig Veda notes very clearly that Varna is the base, as I said, of society. However, the Purush Sukta is, some people call it a myth, which it is not. It's an essential part of Veda, and that is in favor of Varna. And it says, for the betterment of the people, Varnas should be there. So it was subdividing the society basis on the social system, not on color, mind you. No, racism is more on color, black, brown, white, yellow. But here it was a profession. So Manu Simriti under the scriptures, what they did was they elevated Brahmins in the social hierarchy, but they did not in any way create the phenomena of untouchability. The Vedic text, if you read, they neither mention the concept of untouchable people nor the practice of untouchability. And the rituals in Vedas are the noble or the king to eat with the commoners from the same vessel. Later Vedic texts ridicule some professions, but there is no mention of untouchability at all. So it was a purely economic order. Manusmriti, however, mentions outcasts. Yesterday there was a comment by one of the friends, Hajjot Arora, that Manusmriti says no. Manusmriti is very clear, says that the outcast should be ostracized, and all purity, impurity discussed in Dharmashastras, but only in the context of individuals' moral, ritual, and biological pollution. Again, going to the washroom, eating meat, these are the parts which divide Brahmins from the other classes. But no, meat eating is permissible only to the Kshatriyas and to the untouchables, the Shudras. The first and the third Varna cannot eat it. So the pure and impure is used with reference to a group of people, not that the upper three classes must be vegetarian. No. First is vegetarian, second is a non-vegetarian, third is a vegetarian, fourth is a non-vegetarian. The only mention of impurity in the Shastras in the first millennium is about the people who commit grievous sins and are considered impure. Now, what's the history? During the Vedas, Rig Veda, the two versions are there. Varnas are there, Arya Varna and Das Varna. That's it. There were no four society sections. Only there were two, Arya and non-Arya, Dasa. Dasa is Aryas are the noble ones, Das are Dasyu, they were the slave on that. And there was what happened. Aryans when they came and they conquered the local people, so they became Arya, and the Dasa were all the unconquered people were Dasa. They were slaves. So Rigveda society was distinguished by occupation, and herdsmen and artisans practiced a number of crafts. For example, the chariot maker and the metal worker had as much importance, rather more importance, than the Vaishya had. Now they were belonging to the fourth order, Rath Chakra and Karmara. Karmara is a metal worker. Rath Chakra is the chariot maker. These were, though they belonged to the fourth, the Shudras, had a higher social order status than the Vaishya had. Now, towards the end of Atharvaveda period, new class distinction emerged. The former dasas of Rigveda were renamed Shudras. Aryas were renamed Vaishyas, Brahmins, and Kshatriyas according to the profession. Now, this changed in the later Vedic period, that is 600 before Christ. In the early Upanishads, Shudra is referred to as a nourisher. Now, look at it. Shudra is not a point of abuse, he is a nourisher. Shudras were the tillers of the soil, the farmers. But later on, they were not the taxpayers, and they were given land which was gifted to them, and their status was reduced. Then came the second urbanization. This period is quoted by the Pali Buddhist text. While Brahminical texts speak of the four castes, stratified according to jati or kula or occupation, here they are different. So a new jat comes in, Chandals. Chandalas are the bamboo weavers, hunters, chariot makers, sweepers. So Buddhism brought a new caste. Then came the classical period, Mahabharata. And if you read Mahabharata, it was written completed by the end of the 4th century. It discusses Varna system in section 12.181 and presents two models. The first model is Varna as the color based. And this system is presented through a character named Bhikkhu. Brahmins, Varna was white, Kshatriya was red, Vaishya was yellow, Shudra was black. And the description is questioned by Bhartavaja, who says that the colors are seen among all, What really happens is that the desire, anger, fear, greed, hunger, they prevail all over and the same blood flows. So Mahabharata then declares there is no distinction of Varna. The whole universe is Brahm. Brahm was created was Brahma. It is the X which define your caste. Now, Adi Puran, an 8th century text of Jainism, first mentions Varna in the Jain literature. Now, and then the degeneration started, enforcement started. From 1850s onward, photography was used on the Indian subcontinent by the Britishers to classify the various castes. Can you believe it? They used to take pictures and then they include them. First subcaste was religion-based Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, and then the tribes. And then the jobs were there only for the forward classes. The role of the British period is the most condemnable one. The caste system became rigid during the British system, and the British started caste that 10 century year census were there, and they would say, okay, these jobs can only be given to the top three classes, not to children. And then they started targeting criminal caste and their isolation. For the first time in the 19th century, the British colonial government passed a series of laws that were applicable to the Indians based on their religion and caste identification. Then there were criminal tribes were decided that these tribes are criminal. No, simply because you are bound in a certain tribe, you are deemed to be criminal. That was the problem. And in 1871, the government enacted Criminal Tribals Act that all those who belong to certain classes were deemed to be criminals. Can anything be more horrible? Ahirs, Gujars, Jats, they were criminals. Then untouchables like Chamars and Sannyasis, they were criminals. Kalars and Mawars in South India, they were criminals. So the whole system was created that not only were they inferior, but they had criminal tendency. Simply because you're born in a certain family means you have criminal tendency. So this was the 20th century. Now coming to the mistaken notion that others religions apart from Hinduism don't have a caste system. Sikhs, for example, Six gurus that criticize the hierarchy of caste system. And they say, but still, despite that, castes are there. There are many places where the Dalits are not allowed in the village gurdwaras, and they have their own temples, separate gurdwaras. Balmiki Gurdwara, Ramgarhia Gurdwara. And even the gurdwaras are named according to a caste. So, and in 1953, the government of India was forced by the Sikh leadership under Tara Singh to include Sikh castes of the converted untouchables and scheduled castes. Now, the Sikh religion leaders themselves asked that we have certain classes which are untouchable, so give them the same rights. And the Sikh religious literature, if you see from Islamic rule, mentions Varna as Varn, Jati as Jat, and the whole system came up. And then there's endogamy in Sikhs as well. A Jat would not marry a Khatri. Then they say Muslims don't have it. It's wrong. Muslim religion per se does not recognize caste. But if you look in South Asia, the Bradley system is really horrible. There's evidence of social stratification. And even in Muslim families, the lower castes are not permitted to come with that. And they have their caste. For example, they say that they belong to Arabic origin, showing thereby that they are better. And all the Hindu systems have been incorporated. A 14th century political thinker, Ziauddin Barani, says that in Delhi Sultanate, he was at that time, low-born called Alif cannot have the same status as Ashraf. So low-born and high-born, the certification is there. So it was there all time. Then the Christianities had a lot of that. But before I come to Christianity, let me tell you the divisions in Islam. There are Ashrafs, they are converts from the upper classes, the Rajputs, converts from the lower classes, and the untouchables called Bhangis. So the whole caste system they imported from Hinduism, and not the original Hindus, but Hindu system as destroyed by the Britishers. And as a matter of fact, that's continued for a long time. Same is about the Christianity. 90% of the Christians in South India, sorry, in the whole of India, the Indian subcontinent, as a matter of fact, are from the untouchables. But when the moment they become Christians, then they adopt their own social hierarchy. And that is a horrible system. So caste system originally, though based on profession and the trade union, degenerated, but because the Britishers and the Mughal period wanted to take the political advantage, they made it so watertight as to kill ingenuity, innovativeness, and make India a real slave. So the origin may not have been bad, and as I said, it was basically a replica of what was happening all over the world. And let's be very clear, there have to be subdivisions. There has to be division of labor. There has to be stratification. And that was it. But neither color was there. It was pure economic and character. Then it became social, and then it became endemic, and the barriers were erected. And there's what the situation is today, even despite all the affirmative actions by the government. All that mentally people still have those ideas, but urbanization and breakup of the social order, the modernity is chipping away at these classifications, and people don't think of them in the same way they were thinking maybe 50 years back or 100 years back. And that is a hope that the man would be recognized as a human being sooner than later. Thank you.